What Eric Trump was just saying about the unfairness of this proceeding is exactly right. Leticia James is a hardcore partisan. She campaigned saying, I'm going to get Donald Trump. I'm going to go after Donald Trump. This judge, by all appearances, is a hardcore partisan who hates Donald Trump. And we can anticipate he's going to rule against Trump. He doesn't like Trump. He wants to punish Trump. Look, you and I have both been to Mar-a-Lago many times. It is an extraordinary, it's a spectacular property. The idea that that's $18 million is utterly laughable.
Compared to what other properties in Palm Beach are worth, $18 million is an accurate assessment. Donald Trump insists it's hundreds of millions of dollars, even suggested $1.5 billion. It doesn't really matter what he thinks, Adrienne, as I get it. It's what does he tell the banks and the insurance companies? And if he's overinflating the value of Mar-a-Lago, even if Donald Trump thinks it's $1.5 billion, he can say that publicly, I guess. He can claim that. But once he actually puts it in bank documents and insurance documents, that's where it becomes fraud if there's this contradiction with the assessor, right?
Absolutely. The fact is that we have assessors because we have individuals who are supposed to be working under the same principles and values and standards so that they can come up with a very consistent judgment on how much certain things are worth. And the fact that Donald Trump decides to throw that to the wayside, so again, he can create his own facts. Again, that fiction is fraud, and it's something that he needs to be held accountable for. I really, really hope that this jury comes down on him and hard, because we cannot continue to have someone who is such a grifter in a position of leadership or in a position that they can even run companies in New York there. It's really pathetic and sick as far as I'm concerned.
There are these other cases, 4 criminal cases that are out there, including, of course, the Georgia election fraud case. There's the Washington, D.C. federal case. There's the New York criminal case for Donald Trump's hush money payments. It feels like, and of course, there's the documents case in Florida, again, a special counsel federal investigation. It feels like, Donald Trump, obviously, he's in more jeopardy from those criminal cases than a civil lawsuit, because the worst that could happen to him in a civil lawsuit is pay hundreds of millions of dollars of fines, have his businesses told you can no longer operate in New York City. But is there some perhaps momentum that starts to get created if, in fact, Donald Trump is found liable for paying all these fines, his businesses get taken away? Does that perhaps start to soften things a little bit in terms of how a jury might go against Donald Trump in one of these criminal cases?
I would definitely say so. The fact is that he built his entire image on this thought that he is such a great businessman. And as we now definitely know, people in New York City have said this man has been a fraud since day one. And so having that emperor finally be seen with no clothes on is something that I believe will have somewhat of a ripple effect when people recognize, hey, this person has inflated every valuation. He is not the big businessman. He is nothing but a fraud. And so having that accountability, hopefully people would be willing to actually recognize and see he is for who he is. But the problem is now that we have so much mis and disinformation out there and we have his cult following that I don't necessarily know how much of a dent it will make, but I damn sure think it's going to change the way he approaches his time here in the United States.
Another issue, one in Washington, D.C. involving sort of the election interference and January 6th. And that is both judges, the judge in New York and the judge in D.C., the federal judge in the criminal case, have issued gag orders, which essentially means that Donald Trump cannot go on Truth Social and his other platforms as he has in the past and criticize. He criticized the judge's clerk in New York, saying that she was Chuck Schumer's girlfriend. And he retweeted or resent a photo of her with Chuck Schumer. And because of that, the judge issued a gag order saying you cannot criticize court staff, personnel, et cetera. Then there was the gag order that was imposed on him in the federal case in Washington, the criminal case, because Donald Trump has been attacking personally some of the potential witnesses in that case, including Bill Barr. And because of that federal gag order by Judge Chutkan, first she released it for 9 days. She let Donald Trump make some arguments. Then she reimposed it. One of Donald Trump's former lawyers, Ty Cobb, has suggested that he thinks there's a good chance that Donald Trump could actually end up getting jailed for violating the gag order in D.C. And as a result, maybe that explains why he's being so quiet. Would it be very difficult? I mean, there's all these questions about, could you ever jail a former president? But if a president like Donald Trump actually violates a gag order in a federal criminal case, is it that complicated for a judge who's already given repeated warnings to say, okay, You've done this again. Now you're going to spend the night in jail.
For precedent value, no, not at all. This is exactly how a judge would handle it there in the federal courts in DC in the event that someone continued to skirt their orders. And so if he truly is subject to the law just as anybody else, he should be thrown in jail with the Secret Service right by his side. Now, I really don't know whether that is something that would come to fruition. I definitely think the judge would order it, but I wouldn't be surprised if he sent an emergency appeal and there's some push from the powers that be to have him put on some kind of, house arrest watch, no electronics kind of setup. But I also think it would be really important for him to actually go behind bars and be treated just like a civilian, because that's essentially what he is in his criminal ways.
Yeah, and even in the civil case, it would be nice if Donald Trump violates the gag order again, or his attorneys do that, to actually have some accountability. And by the way, the civil case is going to perhaps wrap up in the next couple of days. The defense will have their opportunity later this week, and then we'll see what the judge and what the court will do.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.